We're going to be doing part 2 of burnout. Not an exciting or sexy topic by any stretch of the imagination, but I think a very, very important topic, and certainly a topic that in my last 35 years of working as a coach hits a nerve for just about everybody who I work with. Um, Before we get started, just a quick note for you guys. If you have your human design chart out, it would be good for you to go ahead and have it handy, because I am going to be going through parts of the chart and how those might be affecting your energy and your connection to your vitality. I also want to just say before I get rolling, actually, I'm going to get out of sharing the screen for just a second. Even though I am talking about the chart, I want you to know that what I'm talking about is in reference to the general chart. You might not have some of the markers that we're going to look at in the chart defined in your chart, and you might still feel burned out, and that doesn't mean you're wrong, and it doesn't mean your chart is wrong. We're looking at possibilities and correlations, not causation. Okay, so I want to use this as a conversation that gives you some insights into exploring possibilities for yourself, but I want to be really clear that your chart is not going to indicate that you're doomed in any way, shape, or form. It is the map or the blueprint or the structural outline for how your energy works. So if you think about your house and the hardwiring of your house, right? If your lights go out, there are a lot of reasons why your lights might go out. Maybe you blew out a light bulb. Maybe the transformer down the street blew out. Maybe there's something going on in your wiring. There's a lot of reasons why your lights might burn out. And so when we talk about burnout, it's just like the wiring in your house. There are a lot of reasons why you might feel burned out. My intention today is to invite you to explore possibilities and ways in which you can interact with your human design, your energy blueprint, in a way that really helps you activate the vitality that is part of the nature of who we are. So let's start first by having just a beginning conversation about why burnout matters. It's not really, as I said, it's not the sexiest of topics, but it's a really, really important topic. Last year, Gallup polls estimated just last year that the nation of Germany actually lost, hang on a second, let me move this because I can't see my own slides. Actually, burnout cost the nation of Germany about 9 billion euros in lost productivity last year, every year. Stanford University Graduate School of Business reports that burnout costs the United States 190 billion in healthcare expenses, as well as, and this is the one that really shocked me, 120,000 stress-attributed deaths. So it's not just, I don't like my job, I'm going to go home and eat Cheetos and watch Netflix. It's actually potentially deadly if we're not looking at it with the right perspective. The burnout epidemic has become so bad in Japan that they've invented a new word, karoshi, or death from overwork. Most recently, the death of a 31-year-old woman came to light as a case of karoshi. She died of heart failure after logging 159 overtime hours in a single month. That's probably not knowing when enough is enough, right? Probably an open sacral. As the threat of overwork and burnout rises in Japan, the nation has made efforts to change their cultural attitude towards work. But one of the things that I really want to talk about is it's not just about your cultural attitude towards work. And research really is beginning to show a very different picture about the root causes of burnout. Even mild burnout can tank productivity, retention, presence, and engagement. The question that I've been exploring over the last 35 years while working as a life coach is this: why do some people burn out and others don't? We think burnout is caused by bad management, low pay, overworking, values at work that don't match your own, feeling like you have little or no control over your work, lack of recognition or reward for doing good work, unclear or overly demanding job expectations, doing work that's monotonous, boring, or challenging, or unchallenging rather, and working in a chaotic or high-pressure environment. But in the last couple of years, I've been surveying my clients, you guys, and what I have found is this. First of all, 95% of my clients report themselves as some way feeling burned out. Now, I have a coaching business, and the focus of my coaching is to increase the optimal expression of well-being. So certainly to a certain degree, my clients you guys are going to report feeling burned out if anything is taking you away from this optimal expression of well-being. So to a certain degree, this is an over-reporting of what the national average it has been reported to be. The national average has been reported by the American Sociological Institute as being 65%. I think it's probably somewhere between 65 and 95%. 85% of my clients have reported that they felt emotionally abused as children. And this wasn't just from parents, this was from school, this was even from other students or other children in their lives. I want to invite us as we explore this conversation about burnout. I want to invite us into also exploring the definition of trauma. So when we look at feeling emotionally abused as children, that is trauma. And when I work with my clients, one of the things that I do very often with my clients, and I really want to encourage you guys to do this, is to get back in touch with your 9-year-old self. That part of you that was still untraumatized, hopefully, although I will say some of my clients reported feeling traumatized and burned out even literally from a much earlier age. I have had projectors who have told me they started feeling burned out at the ages of 4 and 5. That's unusual, but I've had that. 9 years old is a really, really cool age because when we're 9 years old, we are still deeply, deeply connected to our imagination. And as you can see from my daughter, she's spending a lot of her creative time and her imagination drawing and cutting out and making dragons. She loves dragons. She lives for dragons. She thinks dragons are amazing. And as she makes these dragons, and there's 287 dragons in her room right now. That's a lot of creativity. She organizes these dragons into little nests. And as she's making these dragons, she's not only exploring her imagination, she's also exploring who she is in the world. She's asking, who do I want to be when I grow up? Which is what we do at 9. We're still rooted with one foot in the world of imagination, but we also have one foot rooted in the more grounded, mature expression of the archetypes that we're living out in our lives. We're asking, who am I? And of course, when it's imaginary, it can be something as beautiful as my daughter who wants to go into the world. She feels like her life purpose is to go out into the world and teach the world how to reclaim their magic by teaching them how to connect with their dragon, right? And everybody has a dragon or dragons that they work with, and she's reconnecting people with their dragons. What happens for many of us when we are 9 is we begin to share this story of who we are that's still rooted in this imaginary world. And we get told, you can't do that, right? You can't do that. You can't be that. You'll never make money doing that. Yeah, but what do you really want to do? What do you really want to study? And the more we grow up and mature, even through our teen years, the more we are very often conditioned away from the dreams of who we are, the potential of who we are, and we are told that we have to get into this little tiny box because this box is the only way we're going to learn how to make money, or the only way we're going to be successful in life, or the only way we can be acceptable in life. And we begin to divorce ourselves from the truth of who we are, the power of who we are, the capacity of who we are as dreamers, as creative beings. So I do want to encourage you as you think about why you might be burned out, to think about what happened to your 9-year-old self. Who was that person? And I invite you to actually do a little writing exercise and reconnect with who were you at 9? What did you want to be? What were your dreams? And I want to invite us to redefine trauma as not just an event that can traumatize us in all the ways that we traditionally think of as trauma, but trauma now, and I want you to encourage you to think about trauma as being any event that causes you to question your lovability, your capability, your value, and the importance of your dreams. Because when we start to mature, oftentimes we learn very quickly from sometimes the very well-intending comments that the people we love tell us. We learn that we're not lovable, or we're not capable, or that we're not valuable, and that our dreams are silly or immature or ridiculous or unrealistic. And we learn very quickly to build protective identities to keep ourselves safe from expressing the heart of who we are out into the world. And anytime you start to build a protective identity, you're putting a lot of your energy into trying to be something you're not. And when you're putting all your energy into this protective identity, even if you have the most amazing job in the world, and I have a lot of clients that have great jobs who are burned out. If you're putting your energy into maintaining this protective identity, it's not going to matter what kind of job you have because your energy is going to get eventually depleted trying to be someone you're not. So, trauma, our new definition of trauma, might be any event, experience, or memory that keeps us from loving and accepting our authentic selves. So, that's my preamble for what I want to talk about today. And then I want to shift gears a little bit and start exploring, especially in the context of the chart, the physiology of burnout. So, we're going to actually talk about human physiology, and then we're going to look at the chart. And again, I know I said this in the very beginning, but I want to stress very clearly that this is correlative information. These are trends that I see after looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of charts over the last 20 years. This is not causative. So if you have any of these things that I'm going to show you in your chart, I don't want you to go, oh my God, I'm doomed. I have this in my chart. I'm going to die. You might die because we're all going to die, but not necessarily from that configuration in your chart. We're looking at relationships between definition and openness and life patterns, but we are not looking at causes. So please don't send me emails saying, oh my God, I have a doomed chart. There's no such thing as a doomed chart. All right. So the first thing we have to pay attention to is that one of the key things that happens when we burn out on a physiological level is we begin to deplete the thyroid. The thyroid is the master gland in the endocrine system, and it is associated with the throat center in human design. The throat center is the center for communication. It's also the center for metabolism into action, meaning it's through the words we use, it's through the conversations we have, it's through communication and the connections that we have to energy or not to energy in the chart that our throat energy is regulated. So if you're a manifestor and a manifesting generator, your throat energy is going to be regulated by a motor, which means you are here to initiate to a certain degree. And the truth for those kinds of energy types is if you are not initiating and you're not taking enough action and not taking action in the right way, you can burn out your thyroid. For those of you who are generators, projectors, and reflectors, if you're pushing too hard, trying to get yourself out into the world, trying to exert your will and insert yourself in with your voice in particular or with your actions in a way that's not correct according to your human design strategy, you also run the risk of burning your thyroid out. The thyroid, your strategy, living your human design strategy actually protects your thyroid, which is, as I said, the master gland in the endocrine system. That means the thyroid regulates the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus, the thymus, the pineal gland, the testes, the ovaries, the thyroid, the adrenal glands, the parathyroid, and the pancreas. And when the thyroid starts to go down, any of these other glands can also start to malfunction, creating lots of different domino effects and collapses in the endocrine system. Problems in the endocrine system can create adrenal burnout, diabetes, hyper and hypothyroidism, sexual hormone imbalances, circulatory and cardiac issues, cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, ADD-like symptoms, autoimmune disorders, depression, weight gain, food addictions, yeast infections, and much, much more. If you want to learn to be strong, sharp, healthy, and sexy, the most important thing you can do, and this is also the most important thing you can do to either heal your burnout if you feel burned out, or to keep yourself sustainable so that your energy stays sustainable and vital over time, you have to live your strategy by human design type. Because your strategy regulates how you use your energy correctly so that you stay aligned with your energy. Let's look now at what I'll call burnout markers in the chart. Now, again, I know I've said this is the third time I've said it, it's the last time I'm going to say it, but I want to just make sure we really are clear. If you have this in your chart, it doesn't mean you're going to burn out. It means that there are aspects of your energy configuration that make you vulnerable to burnout if you're not living true to who you are or if you're not following your human design strategy. So the first marker that we want to look at is the 2946. Now, when we're looking at this, we're looking at it in the context in this particular diagram as a channel, but this can be true if you have either one of these gates colored in your chart. So if you have the 29, which is the bottom one that comes from the red square, or you have the 46, it's the top one that comes down from the yellow diamond, or you have the whole channel, Or, and this is something we don't talk about a lot, or if you live with someone who has this, remember, if you live with someone who has this and you have it open in your chart, that means you've got a lifetime energy field, or an energy field, maybe not for a lifetime, but you're living in an energy field right now where you're amplifying this energy. This is the energy that is all about, first of all, the theme of embodiment. So this is a very sensual energy, and people who have this energy in their chart have the ability in the high expression of this energy to really embody in the physical, sensual way, the full essence of their life force. When we look at this channel in the context of careers or things that people like to do who have this channel, this is generally a design of people who are somewhat enjoy being engaged in opportunities to express life force through physical motion. So I see a lot of yoga teachers with this, a lot of people who are athletes with this energy. There certainly can be a real physicality associated with this energy. This is energy that is commitment and perseverance. So it is kind of like what I call fake willpower. And to a certain degree, it's even more powerful than willpower, because will center energy has to take cycles of rest. Whereas because this is sacral energy, and the sacral motor is the only sustainable motor in the human design system, you actually have the ability through your commitment with this energy to keep going and going and going and going and going and going and going. And if you have the whole channel and you're a generator and you're responding, you can. If you have an open sacral, but you have either one of these gates, you can't keep going in that same way. So it's very important to make sure, again, follow your strategy. Because this is the energy of embodiment, and it is the body, when you have this channel, your body literally becomes the physical barometer of your well-being. So if you have this channel or any of these gates, what happens is if you start to get out of alignment or out of integrity with following your design, your strategy, or you start to say yes to things you don't want to say yes to, and start to say no to things you really want to say yes to, you start being inauthentic in your expression. When you have this energy, your body is going to tell you right away, hey, I don't like that. And you might find that you get a cold, or your back goes out, or you don't feel well. And if you've got a chronic thing going on and you have this channel, it might mean that your life choices maybe have chronically kept you away from being aligned with what you actually genuinely want. So certainly I would say for anybody who has this in their chart as a marker defined, to really be mindful of what is your body telling you when you're not feeling well, or you injure yourself, or something goes on. That's your body's way of saying, whoop, hold on a minute, you're a little out of alignment, and we're not going to take you on our journey the way you want. Your spirit wants you to go do this, but we refuse. And that's your body's way actually of protecting yourself. And certainly when I see this in the chart, I'm always exploring, are you burned out? This is the channel, by the way, of succeeding where others fail and failing where others succeed. Meaning, if you have this channel or any of these gates, you probably are not very good at doing something quote unquote normal. And if you're trying to force yourself to be normal, you might actually burn out from trying to be normal. This is a design of somebody who really has an internal capacity to be successful at something unusual, or to be unusually successful. So oftentimes people with this energy try to crunch down their light because they have a lot of light that they bring in. And when they crunch that light down and they try not to express it because they don't want everybody else to feel bad about how good they are, then they also can burn out. So not thinking big enough in this case can sometimes burn you out. Having a defined head and an ajna is oftentimes, or can be, associated with mental illness, particularly anxiety, headaches. It can actually make you prone to head injury, eye problems, and challenges with the pituitary and or the pineal gland. And if you have problems with the pineal gland, that's not on this slide, you may find that you have problems or challenges with sleeping well. Okay. Again, a lot of the sources of the challenges up here physiologically come from uh, being stuck in thought forms and patterns that don't serve you well. If you're locked into stinking thinking, or you're stuck in mindsets that you can't break out of because of the definition, or it's just hard for you to break out of, it's going to require a little bit of extra energy for you with this to really begin to consciously and deliberately cultivate a different mindset in order to support you in feeling better about your life and what you believe is possible. And if you remember last week, we explored one of the sources of burnout is not having a belief in ease. So if you believe that life is hard and life is terrible and you're lucky if you make it, and if most of us don't make it, and you've got crappy thinking going on there and you have a defined head and ajna, it actually puts your brain and all the stuff associated physiologically above the neck at risk. The throat center. Again, if the throat center is undefined or non-motorized, meaning if you're a generator, projector, or reflector, you have a tendency to fry the thyroid from pushing too hard. That can also be your throat or your voice. And those of you, especially those of you with an undefined throat, you might find if you go out in public, let's say you go to a party, that if you did all the talking, because that open throat center is going to take in all that communication energy and amplify it, that if you ended up being the one at the party that was doing all the talking, then you also might end up with a sore throat or a raspy throat the next day, and you might feel like not talking for a couple of days. If you have a motorized throat, meaning if you're a manifestor or a manifesting generator, first of all, if you're a manifesting generator and you're acting like a manifestor, meaning you're not responding and you're doing all this stuff and you're creating from your ideas and not waiting for the universe to bring you the next step, then you can actually burn out here. And it's easy for you to do that because you have a lot of energy to the throat, so things move really fast. But if you're a manifesting generator, you still have to be responding. And if you're not, you might be burning out your thyroid. I do find that especially people who have the 3420 channel, which is the channel that goes, let me show you that. Let me get out of here from this and show you this. It's the channel that goes from the top left-hand side of the sacral, and then it takes a funky right turn all the way up to the throat. That oftentimes can be, that's actually called the archetype of the manifesting generator. And I find a lot of manifesting generators that configuration in particular tend to go into hyperthyroidism and end up having to have their thyroid removed and then taking medication. If you are a manifester, what oftentimes happens for the manifester is if they are not activating their initiating energy, if you're holding back and hiding out and not tapping into your full power, then you may actually be blowing your thyroid that way. So oftentimes when I'm coaching manifestors, I really have to coach them back into their power. This is especially true of more mature women who are 50 and older, that tapping into that voice and the voice of their power, if they can't do that, that oftentimes will also fry the thyroid. The gate 12, when we look at burnout and the gate 12 is a regulator that is about right timing. And the name of this gate is actually called caution. And when you are living the high expression of this energy, you are waiting for right timing to share what you know, or to share divine inspiration, or to express divine inspiration. This is a gate that is also associated with the breath. And so we talk about inspiration, right? Inspiration is here. And this inspiration, that is the breath of expression of creativity. And it's creativity that's rooted in the divine. And it's creativity that is transformative and has the capacity to help others move into a deeper alignment with abundance. So it's a very mystical, very beautiful gate, but it is shy. It can be shy. And even if you have this energy, a lot of times when people have this energy, they think that you're not shy because you keep that shyness well hidden. I actually have this gate and people don't know that I'm shy, but I'm actually really shy. It also is an energy about creativity and expressing creativity in a brand new way out into the world. And sometimes when you have a lot of that creative energy that's unique and different and transformative, you can experience depression, especially if you're not waiting for the right timing to share that creativity, because you might be sharing it and people don't get it, right? And shy, she was shutting down, which can happen sometimes with this 12 energy, is when you feel like people aren't accepting you for your creative expression, or they're judging your creative expression, or they don't get your creative expression. Sometimes with this 12, we burn out, and we also shut down. The will center is another big, big adventure when it comes to burnout. And again, this is true whether you have the will center open, white on your chart, or defined, red on your chart. If you have a red will center, and that's going to be about 1/8 of you, if you have this colored in on your chart, you absolutely need to have rest cycles. The defined will center works to rest. And because it's willpower, you do have the capacity to push through that need for rest. Not infinitely. You only have a finite capacity to be able to push through that rest. But you can push through that rest uh, and burn yourself out even more when you have willpower energy. The other thing we have to talk about when we talk about will center and resting, especially before we start to look at some of the other elements here, is that we have to really define what is rest, because we have a tendency to think that rest is, oh, sleep, lying on the couch, and or you can rest by reading new information about how to grow your business, right? Resting is when not only are you settling your body and taking care of your body, you also are settling your mind. And that's something I think we miss out on a lot. We tend to settle the body. We lay on the couch, right? You lay on the couch and watch Netflix, but if in the back of your mind you're constantly going, "Oh my God, what am I going to do about the money next week? Where am I going to get that? What am I?" If you're worrying or you're freaking out up here, you're not resting. And in fact, you can burn out worrying while lying on the couch. So rest has to be an action that you take that restores and regenerates your energy. And if what you're doing isn't a sustainable way for you to restore your energy, then you're not actually effectively resting. And whether you like it or not, part of rest is getting enough sleep. And sometimes we tend to push through sleep and the need for sleep because our need for self-care or distraction or whatever is so high that we wait for the second wind and we don't sleep well. So rest is anything you do for yourself that in a sustainable way restores and replenishes your energy reserves. The will center is associated also with the heart and lungs, the stomach, the thymus, of course, burnout. Addictions can happen here, and shocking health events, which are usually there to wake us up. If we get off track, the will center has the capacity sometimes to create shocking health events that serve the function, ultimately, hopefully, of waking you up to a different, more sustainable way of being. The will center is also associated with the energy of self-worth or value. And when we don't value ourselves, or we think we haven't accrued enough material value, meaning you don't have enough money, we start to think, well, I can't rest yet because I can't afford to. And I want to just really clearly say to you guys, it's in the blueprint of being a human being that you can't afford not to rest. It is part of the nature of the human experience to have cycles of good, sustainable, high quality self-care and rest in order for you to keep doing what you're here to do. And if you're not taking that rest consistently in a way that genuinely replenishes your energy source, your energy reserves, if you're denying yourself that because you think you haven't deserved it yet or haven't earned it yet, I want you to start reevaluating that mantra. It's such an important thing that there are actually days of rest built into a lot of different religions, right? Because we need that rest and restoration to keep ourselves strong and healthy. The emotional solar plexus is another place where we sometimes struggle with burnout. Part of what happens with the emotional solar plexus is because it's got this, if you have it defined, if this is colored in on your chart, you have emotional waves of energy. So, and if you have a defined emotional solar plexus, and if you don't understand your nature of your emotional energy, meaning if you start to go down on your emotional wave, if this is colored in on your chart, you have waves or cycles in your emotional energy, and that's normal and healthy for you. So you're going to have days when you feel really awesome and days when you're really more melancholic. And it has nothing to do with your childhood, being screwed up, being in a bad relationship, or any of that stuff. You have inherently in your energy design waves. But the minute we start judging the waves or resisting the waves or trying to put some kind of negative spin or meaning on the waves is the minute we begin to start affecting how healthy those waves can be. And we can actually, through our own self-doubt or through asking the question, what's wrong with me, which is something we tend to ask ourselves a lot, we can actually cause ourselves to drop out of our wave and spin into depression. When you have this center open, and half of you will have it white on your chart, it means you're an emotional empath. And when you have the center open, you're going to feel other people's feelings. You're going to be very sensitive to emotional energy. And that empathy, that feeling other people's feelings often will cause you to do things to keep other people happy. Very often it costs you yourself. making you spend a lot of energy keeping other people happy instead of doing what you need to keep yourself happy, and creating, of course, the opportunity or the potential for burnout. We also see associated with center, when we're not using our emotional energy correctly, the potential for diabetes, emotional eating, and potentially even weight issues. So it is very important on a physiological level to keep the center healthy, to minimize to have a well balanced diet. And a lot of times people ask me, do you do the personal health system? And I don't. And I don't very specifically because I don't believe that the personal health system is a valid way of staying consistently healthy. That you actually need to have your own inner authority around your own food, and that sometimes what we need to eat changes depending on our circumstances, our health, what we're healing, what we're processing, our epigenetic programming. So I'm very hesitant to lock people into fixed food systems, but I will say that we benefit from a well-balanced diet, whatever that is for you. And I do encourage you, if you are really struggling with particularly the emotional eating piece or any of these other issues, to get some support in exploring what might be a really healthy, well-balanced diet for you. The sacral is oftentimes a big place where we burn out. If you are a generator type, meaning if you're a generator or manifesting generator, for the generator types, that's the generators and the manifesting generators. If you're not responding, if you're out in the world pushing with energy you don't have, or you're trying to create out of your head and you're not letting the universe bring you the next step, you run the risk of burning yourselves out. If you are a manifestor, projector, or reflector, and you're trying to live your life like a generator type, and you're pushing and pushing and pushing, and you don't know when enough is enough, you might find that you also burn out. Sacral is, of course, associated with burnout, autoimmune disorders, sexual dysfunction. And oftentimes what we see is a relationship here between burnout and being able to have a healthy sexual relationship, or not using this energy correctly, and then having issues with sexual dysfunction and, or, by the way, reproduction. And weight issues. When I see weight issues that seem to be sacral based, oftentimes they're weight issues that have a history of sexual abuse. And we burn out because of the unhealed trauma of the unresolved sexual abuse, or the unresolved trauma from the sexual abuse. And that's actually a big one. I didn't say the statistic in the beginning, but I will say that in my surveys that I did with my clients, 85% of my clients reported feeling abuse, emotionally traumatized or emotionally abused as children. I will say that 85% of my female clients also reported a history of sexual abuse trauma. So just something else to think about, that sometimes when we have that trauma and it's unresolved, not only do we burn out, we carry extra weight, oftentimes as a protective mechanism to keep ourselves from attracting any other of that kind of energy into our life. Manifestors. Manifestors tend to burn out somewhere around the age of 40. Around the age of 50. You're a manifestor because you have a motor to the throat. You'll either have the will center connected to the throat through a defined channel, or the emotional solar plexus connected to the throat through a defined channel, or the root center defined to the throat through a defined channel. And the root center has to go through either the spleen, or the on the left-hand side, the triangle on the left, or the solar plexus, the triangle on the right. Because you have a motor to the throat, you can get by with pretending to be a generator for a while. You can work for a while. But I find that a lot of manifestors, particularly if they're not resting consistently, or if they are not knowing when enough is enough in any area of their life, or, and this is the other one, or if they've never activated their full manifestor power, they can tend to burn out around 50. Projectors tend to burn out around 35 to 40, and if they really burn out badly, they can have a very slow recovery. Part of what's happening here, and this is true both for the manifestor and the projector, and actually also for the reflector, the open sacral has an energy theme of not knowing when enough is enough. And so that causes us oftentimes to go over to the other extreme of doing more than enough, and doing more than enough sometimes without awareness until you crash and burn. Projectors are here to manage and guide and direct others. They're not here to work in the traditional way that we think of as working. And if you've been working in the traditional way that you think of as working, and you haven't been creating through your if you haven't been creating correctly according to your strategy, if you haven't been waiting for the recognition and attention, and you haven't been standing in your value enough to hold strong to the idea that you wait for the right invitations, the ones that reflect your value, then you can tend to burn out around 35 to 40. And that's really kind of the waking up point a lot of times for a lot of projectors. And I love it when I can get a projector before this point, because it's a lot easier to heal burnout before this point than it is to deal with it after this point. Sometimes the recovery can be very, very slow. And truthfully told, people always want a quick hack for how to get over burnout. And I have not found a system or a way of healing burnout that doesn't take time, because it really does take time to restore the endocrine system. And it can oftentimes take 6-8 months, sometimes a year or even more, to really get all the systems back up and online effectively. The root center is another place where we tend to have or experience a cause of burnout. This is, again, two different manifestations according to the human design chart. If you have an open root, the root center is a pressure center. So when it's open, you're constantly under pressure, and you're making these to-do lists right and left, and you're always under pressure to try to get the to-do list done. But if you have an open root, you know that you never get the to-do list done. You're always adding to it, but you never get to the bottom of it, right? So you're always going and adding things to the to-do list, and this constant pressure. So the pressure in the root center that you experience when it's open causes you to have an over-adrenalized response at a certain point, and then ultimately frying the adrenals and burning out. If you have a defined root center, the defined root center operates in pulses. Okay, it operates in pulses. So it'll pulse on or it'll pulse off. And if your root pulse is off, if you have a defined root center, and you still have to go to work anyway, you have to push against your own energy, that can also burn you out. We will oftentimes see associated with the root center adrenal burnout. Again, weight issues oftentimes is secondary to adrenal burnout. Adrenaline addiction, you're like mainlining pots of coffee all day long, might be something to pay attention to, because you quite possibly are looking at the potential for creating a long-term adrenal fatigue / crash. And anxiety disorders can also be associated with the root center. If you hit what I call a creative dead space in your manifesting process, if you're not getting a job, or you're trying to, and nothing's happening, or it feels like you're not manifesting anything, I really want you to start exploring the idea of seeing that as a vacation, an opportunity to rest that the universe is giving you. We don't like it, okay? We struggle with it. We resist it sometimes. But oftentimes what's happening is your higher self or your inner wisdom is saying, okay, you have done enough. You need a break. And so we create unconsciously this break with this creative dead space. And it's really your life saying, wait a minute, slow down. You're not paying attention to what you need to do right now to get yourself back into alignment with who you are and creating more sustainable energy for yourself. And oftentimes it's also an invitation, because if we, again, going back to the original conversation that I had at the very, very beginning, if you have had any kind of trauma, and remember, trauma defined as any event that's caused you to disconnect from your lovability and your value and your dreams, if you've got that kind of trauma going on, that dead space, that nothing's happening, is actually an invitation for you to begin to explore and heal that trauma that is asking you for attention. So, all right, back to the slides. So next, that was it. Was that our last slide? No, it's not our last slide. Channel. Okay, next one, the channel 3955. This is, again, a very emotional channel. It has high highs and low lows. It's often associated with emotional eating. I put hoarding here. I'm not a real huge fan of that, but let's just reframe that as holding on to things out of fear of lack. And any kind of consciousness that is rooted in fear of lack, or any kind of action that you take that's rooted in a fear of lack, can be a low expression of this energy and actually can burn you out. So my mom has this channel. I'll give you an explanation. My mom is a coupon addict, and a coupon addict to the degree to where she'll drive 25 miles because she has a $5 off coupon. She'll spend more money in gas driving to get the coupon than she will, with the coupon itself. So even though that's not technically hoarding, I would lump that in that category as something that's rooted by lack. And she spends an awful lot of energy trying to procure and secure for herself all these things that she thinks she needs just in case for some reason someday she might need them. And there's a lot of anxiety around this. So um, diabetes is associated with this channel, and weight issues again with this channel. And you can, because this channel is not just emotional, it's also adrenal. It's also adrenal. So if this channel, if you have this channel defined, you have an emotional solar plexus and you have a defined root center, which means your root pulse is going to be influenced by your emotional state. And if you go down on your wave, and you all will have an emotional wave if you have this defined, then your adrenaline energy tends to go down with it. So people who have this energy in particular tend to, when their emotional wave goes down, actually lose their physical energy as well. And again, it's this place where if you start asking the question, what's wrong with me, instead of going, oh, this is the nature of my natural emotional wave, and I'm just going to be with it. I'm going to embrace this as a deeply inner creative time and not judge it, not fight it, not resist it. Then you can keep this energy really healthy. And the high expression of this energy is this is a design of somebody who can be potentially very, very creative, very, very expressive, very transformative in what they offer the world. And actually, there's alchemy here. And it's actually a deeply mystical energy that understands innately that when you align with the idea that the universe is abundant and you can stay in a place of faith in the unseen, this energy can be incredibly powerful and incredibly creative. The spleen center, when you have a defined spleen, whether you have a defined spleen or an open spleen, and I'm going to just point you here, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but if you are not operating in a high level of expression with the energy in your spleen center, if you have any of the gates on the spleen center defined, you run the risk of, as a symptom of your burnout, experiencing anxiety disorders, sensitive immune system if it's open, an insensitive immune system if it's defined. If the center is open, also you can sometimes burn out because you are a medical empath. You will feel other people's bodies and immune energy. And if you're feeling their immune energy and you're not clear that, oh wait, this isn't mine. Like if you go to a hospital, you have an open spleen and you're like feeling all that immune energy in your body, you might actually be burning out or feeling physical symptoms that aren't even yours. And it is important to kind of tease that out. The biggest piece here, though, is this. Any of the gates defined on the spleen center will create anxiety and potential for fear and paralysis. And the energy that we put into maintaining and sustaining and trying to deal with that paralysis or that fear can actually deplete the adrenals and burn us out. If you have the gate 28, which is one of the spleen gates, you, first of all, one of the things to be aware of is that if Neptune in your chart is in the gate 28, it makes you a little bit more vulnerable to addictions. Same as, I mean, it can be in any planet, but certainly it can certainly be uncomfortable, or it can be certainly potential towards addiction in any planetary position. Neptune, though, tends to be the planet that is most often associated with addictions, and so consequently, you will tend to be have more of a tendency towards addiction, particularly as a strategy for managing burnout when you have the gate 28. And again, remember, burnout being a secondary symptom of unhealed trauma. Because the gate 28 oftentimes explores and experiments with the meaning of life through making choices that express that are life-threatening choices, meaning you tend to push life a little bit up to the edge. You certainly can take burnout to an extreme, oftentimes with this energy, and certainly because this energy can sometimes be struggle, there can be a struggle for health. And Sue, just informing you, my mom is totally outed on this issue. It is a family joke that my mother will drive 100 miles to save 10 cents. And it's totally, she knows it. We all think it's funny. So no fears. I'm not outing my mom. Well, if you see this in a chart, just as, again, something to pay attention to, because when we start to push the edges of burnout, sometimes when we see the gate 28 and the gate 51 both defined in a chart, when we push the edges of burnout, we're also oftentimes pushing the edges of life. So we talked about in the very beginning, the Stanford University study that says that every year there are 120,000 deaths in the United States from burnout, which again blows my mind. That I would suspect that there is a correlation here between these two gates and people who are pushing it to that extreme. So just be mindful. Again, I'm hesitant sometimes to point this out because I know everybody's looking at their chart going, oh my God, do I have this? The near death can be metaphorical and sometimes it's literal, but it's correlative, not causative. So if you have this in your chart, it's not like you're going to die, okay? It's just something for you to be mindful of, that you have built into your design this very powerful, shocking potential that serves to shock you back awake into your life. And that burnout, and this is true for all of us, but certainly if you have this in your chart, if you burn out, that shock that comes from the burnout is very much an initiation into an exploration of how can I bring my life back into alignment with who I really am and how my energy operates. This is our last slide. So I just want to say this. Again, same thing, correlative, not causative, but this is oftentimes a big source of burnout that I see in women. And again, it doesn't mean that men don't get breast cancer. They do, and that is something we don't talk about a lot, but men can get breast cancer. And certainly men can be codependent, this is also the potential configuration for codependency. The gate 27 is the gate of responsibility and guilt. And certainly being overly responsible or feeling guilt, okay, can sometimes burn us out. And if you have a tendency to feel guilty all the time, certainly check your chart, see if you have the gate 27 defined. And certainly I would say be mindful of not becoming responsible or taking on responsibility for things you shouldn't be responsible for. The gate 29, back to that channel, we talked about that a little bit, is the energy for commitment. And if you have an open solar plexus, you're emotionally empathic. In this particular configuration, with these three things in a chart, I see the definition of somebody who has the commitment to feel responsible for keeping everybody happy, which is the perfect storm for being codependent, and also the perfect storm sometimes for not nurturing yourself, taking care of yourself enough to stay strong and healthy and sustainable. Again, these are all correlative, not causative. I'm saying this with great caution, not because I'm wanting you to panic and freak out that, oh my God, I have this in my chart. I'm wanting you to explore your chart and the message that your chart is bringing to you energetically, and to look at what might be some of the vulnerabilities if you're not living aligned with the truth of who you are.